Hey folks, welcome to eCommerce 360. Today we have Ashley, who is the Vice President of Partnerships from Hockey Media. Hockey Media helps brands grow through marketing consultancy. Hey Ashley, welcome to this show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So Ashley, before we kick this off, let's start by you telling us a bit about yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and your role at Hockey Media and the larger vision at Hockey Media, what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a performance digital marketer with about a dozen years experience in the industry. I've worked at two different agencies now, as well as with my own consultancy and in-house with several different brands. I actually started my career originally in Canadian politics. So I actually had
Wow.
very traditional roles as a senior political aide to the prime minister, members of cabinet, and
Wow.
other public figures. And naturally, a lot of politics is communication, public relations, and marketing. And then, of course, as the world continued to evolve and social media platforms became more and more important in everyday life, they also became more important in campaigns. And in order for the government as well as public figures to reach their constituents effectively on social media. So I actually spearheaded a lot of those efforts within my own political party back in Canada, getting our colleagues and our caucus members and our candidates onto social platforms and connecting with their constituents and with voters. And so that was sort of my initial foray into really seriously full-time professionally in my career into digital marketing. And then before leaving Canada, I actually managed community, including all paid social and a lot of email fundraising for the largest political party in Canada and the Prime Minister and his wife. And then I moved here to the United States about 5 years ago, joined another digital marketing agency, have done a few things in between, ended up back in the startup ecosystem, which is kind of where I used to play in and out of politics. And yeah, here I am at Hawk Media today, and I oversee our partner program. And what that means is we build a lot of wonderful relationships with third parties. A lot of them are service-based or technology-based partners that have complementary offerings that our clients can leverage to help meet their growth marketing goals. So yeah, I'm a marketer. My personal sort of background is primarily in paid media buying, in particular on social. And I know we're going to talk about that today. So it's probably pretty timely. But yeah, day to day, we
So
obviously work with many wonderful partners like ShippingChimp.
that's a fascinating journey from politics to social media. But of course, social media has of late been playing a lot of role in politics. So that's fascinating. So let's jump into our topic. Actually, I think then you're the right person to kick it off, right? How's this Facebook update going to affect e-commerce brands at large? I know it started because of a lot of political parties misusing it, but how is it going to affect the e-commerce brands? That's very concerning, right? So let us a bit into how do you think, from your experience with coordinating with brands, what do you think are the pros and cons of the update?
Definitely. So I would say so it's interesting because back in the day, there was a lot of resistance and hesitancy for politicians and political parties to get online. And it was a big learning curve to get them to that point. And of course, nowadays, especially here in the United States, we've seen how that has evolved over the years.
Yeah.
It started with Obama's campaign leveraging SMS back in 2008. That was really cutting edge and revolutionary at that time. And then, of course, nowadays we've seen all of this misinformation and disinformation that occurs across social and how that can literally affect the outcomes of elections. So yeah, to your point, it's been a really interesting, fascinating journey. So to that end, Apple, in particular, Google, have wanted to try and take a privacy focused stance to protect consumers' information. And so that, of course, has a trickle down effect on all of the different marketing and advertising platforms like Facebook. So the changes that Facebook has made are in response to Apple's new requirements. So basically, as Apple rolled out iOS 14.5 onward, Facebook then, in order to be compliant with Apple's new guidelines, enabled what's called the ATT, app tracking transparency pop-up in its app. And they started in May this year. So basically, Apple required every single app developer and brand or business that has an app on the App Store to have this ATT pop-up to decide to opt in to tracking or opt out. But historically, this had always been an opt-out that was kind of buried in the settings that you had to go looking for to opt out. Now it's front and center, it's popping up when you're using the app or when it's going on in the background to double check and confirm that you are opting in to use that. So this basically tracks their usage of the app and their data overall. And the reason this affects Facebook and other advertising platforms is the identifier for advertisers, which is called the IDFA. That's the way that devices actually assign a unique identifier to an Apple device, and in turn, a user who has that device, to then track them and advertise to them accordingly without really revealing personal information. But basically, more and more people are opting out. So if, let's say, historically there had been nearly 100%, let's say, opt-in rate, experts are predicting that over the course of time, it'll continue to diminish to the point where perhaps there might only be 10% of users opted in. So obviously that is a massive delta that brands are going to have to deal with. And this affects their ad campaigns because they won't be as specific, they won't be as personalized, they won't be as direct. So yeah, I mean, that's why it's important to note. So generally speaking, that's what the update is. The only other thing that was really interesting is Facebook use the power of their platform to start advertising to users back in spring of this year to encourage them to opt in. And they were basically telling their own users that their ads would be better and more personalized, that advertising revenue is what allows them to keep Facebook and Instagram free for users and not have sort of a monthly membership fee. And it would help small businesses that rely on ads. So it was really interesting too, that as Facebook was preparing to roll out the ATT pop-up to be compliant with Apple, they were simultaneously trying to encourage their specific users to opt in to ensure that their ads would remain personalized. And so, yeah, I mean, this means a lot for brands and businesses. And that's why they should be paying attention to it, because it's probably the biggest shakeup that we've seen in the digital marketing industry since GDPR.
Absolutely. And also now brands have to worry about their end users opting in twice, right? One in the iOS platform and then again in the Facebook, and it's going to be such a big downer for them. So what are the alternate channels for brands? Okay, first of all, before we get on with that, what do we do with the existing Facebook ads? Like, what do brands do with them? How do they improve their targeting with the existing campaigns? I know it's going to not fetch as much result as it used to, but how's it going to be now? What can they do to improve the targeting within these limitations that we have?
Totally. So yeah, I mean, the way that this is affecting Facebook ads already, it's creating these extra hurdles for advertisers. It's created more technical steps for them to set up their Facebook campaigns for soundness and for efficacy purposes. And then over time, the results will continue to diminish against what they had historically been, because those audiences will continue shrinking and whatever data they previously had will become stale, right? Over time, it's no longer current. So specifically, there's going to be targeting limitations that advertisers see on the platforms. It's going to be more difficult to implement that target-based advertising. There's going to be a lot of limitations when it comes to personalization and retargeting. And then in particular, there's also going to be issues with reporting and attribution. So it'll continue to become more vague and less specific over time and delayed. So previously, data was passed through in real time when an event or conversion event took place on your site as a brand or business. And now it can actually take up to 3 days after the conversion event took place to receive that information in your ads manager on Facebook. So those are some major limitations. One of the other limitations advertisers should be aware of is they are now only going to be able to use a total of 8 conversion events per domain. So they have to really think about their strategy, what the most important conversion events are for their business and their current customer journey. And then they're going to have to go ahead and set up those 8 conversion events if they haven't already. And so that's first and foremost what they need to do to set up their account for success in this new environment. And then the other thing that they need to be aware of is the default attribution window has also changed. Historically, it had been a 28-day click, and it is moving to a 7-day click. Now, that's just important to note if you are comparing your data month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, et cetera. And it's also important to take into account when you think about specifically your customer journey and how long historically you have seen customers move through your conversion funnel and what their timing of their journey looks like. So those are all things that brands and advertisers should be paying attention to.
So this looks very serious, right? Especially if brands are dependent for acquisition completely on Facebook. So what are the alternatives that brands have right now? Is it email, is it SMS, or is it other social media channels? And what is the closest to Facebook acquisition that they have currently?
Definitely. So first and foremost, I think that brands should continue to use Facebook, Instagram, and other paid acquisition channels at this time until it gets to the point where they're truly not as efficient as they used to be. But right now, it's still better than it will be months from now, right? So they might want to front load those prospecting, top of funnel branding and awareness on these paid platforms. In addition, this is not specific to Facebook. We're talking about the ways that Facebook has handled this, but this massive ATT change was implemented by Apple, and it's affecting all of the different advertising platforms, not just Facebook and Instagram. So you're finding similar effects and fallout on Google Ads, on TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat, etc. And all of those different platforms are addressing it in different ways. So I think this is why it's also important to just always think about your marketing and channel mix and experimenting with different channels. You know, TikTok is obviously really up and coming. Virality is a big thing on the platform. So you might even want to think about organic social again in that sense and not just the paid efforts. And Snapchat, you know, has seen a massive uptick in users in the past year and the past quarter. And so that might be a channel that is often at times overlooked that advertisers and brands might want to reconsider at this time. But that's just on the paid side. I would say outside of paid, owned and earned channels are basically more important than ever. So brands should definitely be thinking about their existing email database and how can they grow that database right now. Maybe they'll do specific acquisition campaigns to grow that database right now. Maybe they'll do a giveaway to just build out that list, segment it, and really focus on engagement and retention of those existing subscribers and customers, because that's going to be essential, because all this hyper pixel segmentation that we used to have is gone. So you also might want to think about zero party and first party data. If you have this great subscriber list or customer list, why don't you survey them or quiz them or send them engaging and interesting content to hear from them what they want to see from you? Do they want discounts? Do they want a sale? Do they want a giveaway? Do they want to see a collaboration? Do they want to see a new product line? Do they want to see variety in the colors or the, you know, something in your product that you haven't done before? Listen to your customer and cater to those needs. And then on that same front of lifecycle marketing, I would say SMS. So many brands still haven't made that leap into SMS. And of course, there have been some changes in SMS this year too, with the shaft guidelines, at least here in the United States. But that obviously only applies to very specific segments. So the average e-commerce brand, it's a no-brainer. They should absolutely be getting into SMS and engaging with their customers there. And, you know, during this pandemic, we've seen, despite the fact that a lot of people have been at home a lot more than they would be than on the go, we've still seen mobile phone usage, including, I guess, just whilst people are around their own homes, continue to increase. So, you know, people are often more likely to look at an SMS on their phone than open up their email on their phone, let's say. So I would say own and earn channels, email and SMS. Like I said, organic social, don't overlook the potential of virality, especially on platforms like TikTok. And then I just think content is queen. Content is queen. It's
Yeah.
important to think about, well, what interesting, intriguing content can you put out there? How can you drive awareness or education of would-be new customers? And just continue to iterate, rather than perfect, continue to iterate. Good is better than perfect. Otherwise, you'll never get anything out the door. You'll never publish anything if you're waiting for it to be perfect. So just keep thinking about, what do my customers care about? What do they need to know to convert and buy my product? And, think about putting that out there into the world.
Absolutely. So you have listed, I think, a number of channels that marketers can now look forward to other than the paid Facebook ads. One other thing that's gaining popularity is retention marketing, right? Probably because of these privacy updates, e-commerce brands are starting to look into their own customer base and customer data and trying to nurture the relationship that they already have established with their customers. So, what are your thoughts on nurturing existing customers for increasing repeat sales and decreasing the churn that they have?
100%. If everything that we just talked about means that the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, is increasing. But we didn't say anything about the existing customers. You already have a relationship with those customers, and hopefully they're opted in to your email communications, right? Or your SMS communications, like I mentioned. So yeah, absolutely. If it's becoming more expensive for your bottom line to acquire new customers, why don't you turn your attention inward to your existing or previous customers? And I think there's lots of different ways that you can increase activity and engagement with them. Other than the surveys and quizzes that I mentioned, you might want to consider having a really strong promotional content calendar, whether that's on your earned social channels, whether that's on your email channels, whether that's on SMS. And you should think about what different sales and giveaways and promos and contests and sweepstakes you might plan out for the year. You might also want to think about that content, like I mentioned, and weaving that in. If you're going to create a piece of content for your blog, why don't you repurpose it and put it in a newsletter and send it out to your dedicated readers, right? So work smarter, not harder. If you're already creating an asset, how can you get the most bang for your buck out of that asset and get it in front of as many valuable eyes as possible? I also think it's important to do so personalization is something we've been talking about in the industry for a long time. Obviously, these changes really affect personalization on paid channels, but if you already have zero-party or first-party data on your existing customers, use that to personalize messages to them. They bought XYZ from you. Why don't you talk to them about XYZ or ABC product that is complementary to XYZ? Hey, we know you got this. Why don't you check this out? This will pair well, things like that. I also think beyond post-purchase engagement that's personalized, I also would think about cart abandonment campaigns. If you don't already have that set up, that's an easy win. That person was one click away from purchasing. Why don't you send them a note? Hey, you forgot to check out, or don't miss out, or this sale ends today. These items are still waiting in your cart for you. Like, create some urgency, get them over there. And if nothing else works, maybe you offer them a little cherry on top, maybe like, hey, if you check out today, here's an extra 5% off this purchase, right? So I think cart abandonment emails are important. I also think re-engagement or win-back campaigns are important, because you might also have some lapsed customers that have purchased in the past some time ago, haven't engaged with you recently, haven't purchased recently. So how can you communicate and reach them effectively? What might be most interesting them? You might even divvy up that segment into a couple segments and experiment with different offers or engagement campaigns. So I think that could really help. I also think loyalty or refer a friend programs. How do you incentivize those existing customers to keep coming back for more? You build loyalty amongst that base, right? So yeah, I think those would be some of the key things. And then of course, if you have a line of products as an e-commerce merchant, how can you best do product recommendations to your existing customer base, right? So those are some of the things that I would be thinking about to best nurture those existing and previous customers to hopefully repeat sales.
That's wonderful. So as a final question, as a wrap up, we just want to leave you with one last question. What do you think is the future for ads, specifically Facebook ads, or even organic in Facebook. I think organic in Facebook is almost dead, so it's only Facebook ads and ads on other social platforms. What does the future look like? Do you think they'll all be, having the same kind of future where there is no personalization, there's no scope for it at all, or do they have still a chance to marketers still have some hope there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't think paid digital advertising is dead.
Mhm.
Over 50% of digital marketing budgets historically have gone just to paid digital advertising, specifically on Google and Facebook, who are basically
Yeah.
historically have been in a dead heat for about 50% each of that paid digital budget. So I don't think it's dead. I think that Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, Twitter, TikTok, Google ads, they're going to continue to adapt on their own platforms to try and make this as bespoke as they can within the
Mhm.
limitations. And even so, like I mentioned, Google is planning its own privacy forward thinking as well. And they're going to be eliminating cookies on Chrome, which is obviously one of the most popular browsers in the world.
Yeah.
But of course, that will also decrease the efficacy again of advertising across these platforms, including Google Ads. And so I think originally Google has announced this several times over the years, and most recently they punted this out to 2023. And
Mhm.
specifically, the reason they did that they cited was trying to understand and come up with a model to ensure that Google Ads will still be feasible and profitable and useful for brands and businesses and advertisers. So I think that, some of these large platforms are really thinking about how they can mitigate the negative effects of these.
Mhm.
I do think we'll continue to see things moving in this way. This really started in the EU with GDPR a few years ago.
Yeah.
At that time, brands and businesses in the US already thought, oh, it's only a matter of time until the US
Yeah.
passes similar legislation. And then in lieu of that, we've seen, industry titans take it into their own hands and make these types of changes. So, yeah, I think that we might see even more campaigns of platforms encouraging users to opt in, kind of like what
Mhm.
we saw on Facebook with their own campaigns. I think that brands and businesses will diversify their channel mix. They won't rely so heavily on paid social or search ads for acquisition. They might think more about podcast advertising. They might think more about native content. They might
Mhm.
think more about traditional PR.
Mhm.
Outside of a pandemic, maybe they'll do more guerrilla marketing. Maybe they'll do more out of home. Maybe we'll see more billboards and bus stop ads. I think we'll just start to see more diversity over time.
That's amazing. So more permission-based marketing and more organic marketing and not the scammy, cheap, intrusive marketing. That's great.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on our show today and leaving us really very enthusiastic and energetic, comments on the not so great Facebook update. I think a lot of marketers were bit down after coming across the iOS and Facebook updates. I think what you have, coming into our podcast and letting us know is gives us a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm for an exciting future. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.